There are many stories about Jesus in the Bible, and there are many stories about people in the Bible who interacted with Jesus. But in John 21:25, John writes, "Now there are also many other things that Jesus did. Were every one of them to be written, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written." Now, we can only wonder what might have been going on behind the scenes in some of these stories. For example, what did Christmas night look like for the shepherds? Well, I'm a shepherd, so it's not like I have the best job in the world. I mean, most people kind of look down at us shepherds, so I just try to mind my own business. I mean, it's kind of like an unwritten rule. Nobody talks to me, so I don't talk to them. But for me, I will never forget this one night in the field. I mean, I'm going to remember till the day I die. It was back several years ago when Caesar Augustus made everybody go back home to be counted, and it got pretty busy around here in Bethlehem. As I said before, though, I just minded my own business. I only talked if anybody said anything to me, and that didn't happen very much. In fact, if I remember right, on this night, I don't think nobody said nothing to me. Well, I mean, that is until it happened. Here we are in the middle of the night, and out of nowhere, all of a sudden, the sky explodes with light that was so bright, it looked like daylight out there. And I was like a little scared at first because I wasn't sure what was going on. To be honest, I kind of thought maybe I was dreaming, so I started rubbing my eyes and trying to wake myself up, and then I realized I was already awake. I mean, I was wide awake. And this light, it turned out to be this huge herd of angels, and they must have known what I was thinking, because one of the angels looked at me and said, "Do not be afraid." But that didn't stop me. I sure was afraid. And that made me wonder, why in the world would an angel come and talk to a shepherd? I don't know if that angel read my mind again or what, but immediately I got the answer I was looking for. He was coming to tell me about the Christ that was born right here in Bethlehem. And from what I could tell, this was the same Christ that all those smart religious people have been talking about for years now. And personally, I'm not the most religious, but the angel said something that even I knew doesn't make sense. He said this baby was going to be laid in a manger. Now, I have seen how dirty animals can really be, and trust me, I don't think you want to put a baby in there. But sure enough, the angel was saying that the promised Christ was laying in a manger. This made no sense to me. So I had to go check it out and see what this was all about. And that was the best decision I think I've ever made. That moment changed my life. I met this baby that the angel talked about. They had named him Jesus. And I knew immediately there was something different about this baby. I knew that he really was the Son of God. But that's a story for another time. I knew that this story would be a story I would be sharing for the rest of my life. I think there will be other people that will be telling about Jesus for the rest of their lives. Once Jesus went to a wedding in Cana, and he had an interesting encounter with the servants at the wedding. Well, my job's pretty simple. All I have to do is help out with some of the planning that goes on in the weddings around Galilee. Obviously, there are times when things go perfect and other times when things don't quite go so smoothly, but we always try to find a solution to any of the problems that come up. Now, I do serve at a lot of weddings, so they all kind of blend together. But there's one wedding that I will never forget. It was so much different than any other wedding I've ever served at. It was a wedding in Cana. Everything had been perfect so far. It was already the third day of the wedding, and then it happened. We got the word that we were out of wine. Now, we thought we'd planned for enough, but I guess everybody was drinking a little bit more than we expected. And that was a moment of panic for us servants. So we were all trying to decide who's going to go tell the master of the feast. Somehow all my good friends and fellow servants decided that yours truly was going to have to be the one to tell him. I pretty much felt like I was going to turn in my resignation letter to this guy. I knew he wouldn't be happy. So I tried to run through a couple of scenarios in my head, see what might sound the least forceful. And I even kind of tried to make it sound like maybe it was a good thing instead of a bad thing. But nothing was really sounding much better. So finally I realized that my only hope was to beg for mercy. So I prepared myself for this walk of shame. But right as I took my first step, I was stopped in my tracks. It was this lady and her son who had come to talk to all of his servants. And she kind of had like this confidence in her step. And she told us to do whatever her son said. Now, I obviously had a lot more important things to deal with. But this did give me a good excuse to put off my little talk. So I jumped at the opportunity. And her son gave us kind of weird instructions. He said to take 6 water jars and fill them up with water. Now, these things were like 20 or 30 gallons apiece. So, I mean, he's asking for like 180 gallons of water. And in my mind, that's going to take a while. I was happy to oblige and put off my little talk a little bit longer. So I made sure that the jars were filled up completely. I mean, like completely as in they could not fit another drop of water into these jars. So we brought them back, and it was a good delay, but I realized that I had to start preparing myself for the fact that I was going to have to go talk to the master of the feast soon. Well, the lady's son, whose name I found out was Jesus, told us to draw some of the water out and bring it to the master of the feast. Now, I wanted to argue with him because, I mean, this water was disgusting. And it would have been even worse had the master of the feast been expecting wine and got water. But then again, what did I have to lose? I mean, I was about to lose my job anyways. And who knows? Maybe the water would make him sick and he wouldn't be able to fire me or something. So I brought a cup to him. As I handed him the water, my heart started to pound. And as I reached out my hand, I even noticed the muddy texture of the water. And the master of the feast took the cup, and without really looking into it, took a big gulp. And I gasped, and he swallowed it, and he stared at me for what seemed like hours. And hours. And hours. And hours. And then, as if in slow motion, he opened his mouth. And I knew one of two things was about to come out of his mouth. Either he was going to spit out the muddy water, or he had swallowed it and was going to yell at me. But to my surprise, he smiled and then told me that I was brilliant. He said he was so happy that we'd saved the best wine for the end of the feast. Now, I was in shock and kind of wondered if maybe the water had done something to his brain. But then everybody started to drink this wine. I even took a sip myself. And sure enough, this Jesus guy had done something special. This disgusting water had turned into some of the best wine I'd ever tasted. This Jesus guy, he had saved the day at the wedding. And he saved my job. And I'm never going to forget this day as long as I live. Jesus encountered many people. And oftentimes, I can only imagine that this encounter was memorable. So what about you? Have you encountered Jesus in your life? Has he made a memorable impact? Has he changed the way that you live?